The Philadelphia Phillies recently received some great news regarding a key arm coming out of the bullpen, as José Alvarado is set to return to this Phillies team after a little bit of a break and needing to step away for some reasons that still have not been revealed. I want to dive into what Rob Thomson is saying about the hefty lefty, what it means that José Alvarado is returning to this Phillies team, and my kind of level of excitement or concern for the big fella as they head into this playoff push. Now, before I dive fully into it, do want to remind you guys to make sure that you are smashing that subscribe button. That at this point in time, just 15.8% of you guys tuning into the videos have subscribed thus far. We want to get this Phillies Digest family growing as large as possible. We're about a month away from the real playoff push, and we want as many of you a part of this journey with us. So make sure you are smashing that subscribe button. It does help us out here, and we are closing in on that 1,000 subscriber mark. So appreciate each and every one of you guys. Now, to dive into the story of today, I want to start by saying that this is a really good news for this point. This is a far more positive twist that I thought I was going to be able to put on this video, that I kind of had held off on releasing anything for a couple days because I do think this is a pretty personal matter. But I want to start with the headline that we have. Shout out to Adam Aronson of the Philly Voice, who posted this article saying that José Alvarado is rejoining the Phillies, Rob Thomson said, with the subheading stating that Phillies manager Rob Thomson reportedly told the media on Friday afternoon that José Alvarado is returning to the team. The expectation coming that Sunday he will officially be rejoining the roster and be available. Still working out the process of things, but this is great news because when reports initially broke, it seemed like it's going to be a long-term situation in which the Phillies would not have Alvarado as an option, and it seemed like something pretty serious that he was dealing with off the field. Now, I don't want to dive fully into the speculation or really what could have been going on. Again, I do think that's a pretty personal matter and do hope Jose dealt with whatever it was that he did need to deal with. But to kind of give a little bit of context, this was the initial announcement that came out. Matt Gelb with The Athletic tweeting out that Jose Alvarado has gone on the restricted list to deal with what the Phillies call a, quote, a personal matter. Alvarado was here today, then left the ballpark before batting practice after a meeting with team officials. Michael Mercado is active. And to add a bit more context to things, Alvarado himself did put this on his Instagram story here. I'm not going to read this word for word or go too deep into it, but it is kind of a prayer talking about giving him the strength to deal with things, and you guys can read into this if you want. For what it's worth, as far as the context of things, Alvarado is a very religious guy who throws prayers up on his social media fairly regularly, so this is something that super jumps out of the norm to me. But I will say, when reading through this is something that hits a little harder than I would say his typical just prayer that he's throwing up on his story, and something that very clear that he's dealing with something off the field entirely here. So happy that Jose is returning to this Phillies team. Again, don't want to dive into things, but do want to talk a little bit about him on the field as a whole. That for Alvarado, and I want to talk specifically this blurb from Adam Aronson's article here, in which he writes that, boom, Alvarado was placed on the restricted list on Monday to attend to a personal matter. Thomson repeatedly said that he had, quote, no idea when left-handed reliever would be back, but did express confidence that it would be some point before the end of the 2024 season. Ultimately, it appears Alvarado's time off the active roster will last for just 4 days. The 29-year-old has had a difficult year with some stretches of dominance, but more periods of futility. Alvarado owns a 4.30 ERA and a 1.31 WHIP on the season, and before going the injured list, was knocked down in Thomson's pecking order. His shaky command has caused plenty of problems in 2024, but Alvarado is still going to be a crucial component of this team's bullpen as October nears. He is by far their most effective reliever against left-handed hitters, who he has held in a collective 131, 185, and 246 slash line. So that's going to be the Alvarado role. There were points in times where this guy was the fringe closer, where he has closed out some ninth inning and high leverage spots in the playoffs. He's also been a pretty regular setup man. He's got the stuff when things are going well, but unfortunately the command issues have just been too much to overlook this year. That with Alvarado this year, more than I've seen from him in several seasons at this point, you can just tell the nights where he does not have it, where he cannot find the zone whatsoever. We're talking about him walking in runs this year, things like that, where he cannot focus. And that was the book on Alvarado when he first came to Philadelphia, that he was a bit of a reclamation project that the organization wanted to deal with, that we knew there were command issues. And beyond just the command, which are once again are very evident that you can see on those nights where he can't pick his spots or really get it over the plate in its entirety at all, there's also the moments where things just look a little flat. There isn't that pop, the movement on his ball, which really is one of the calling cards of him as a pitcher. He's a big guy. He throws it incredibly hard, and there tends to be a lot of movement near the plate. That whether it is a cutter that's going down your throat or even his fastballs, the two-seamer, the four-seamer, that there's a little bit of action as it is coming in on you, and that's something that I think is really important to his game. And when that's not going, when the balls are coming in flat, that's a huge issue. Now, to talk about as in its entirety, his production on the season. I know it hinted at things here, but we're talking about in 56 games this year, a win-loss percentage of just .167 here. Again, I don't read into that too much for relievers here, but in 52.1 innings pitched, he's allowed 6 home runs, 52 strikeouts, 44 hits. That's 7.6 hits per 9 innings, is way more than we're accustomed to for the big fella here. A 4.3 ERA and a .131 whip here. Just a bit more than they can afford to have. An FIP of 4.16 on the season, another number that is not great for the big fella there. And it's interesting when thinking about this Phillies team as a whole. Yes, it's unfortunate that Alvarado hasn't had his best stuff, but it's also kind of a positive sign that it hasn't harmed this team in the way that you would expect. When taking a peek at this bullpen as a whole, there's a lot of names that have outperformed expectations as a whole. That Estevez, it's still going to be interesting to see what his role is. I will say he doesn't have quite the bite or the true closer presence that I think the Phillies were hoping, and I myself was certainly hoping. And something that I think is a little telling with that is in game 1 against the Braves that Jeff Hoffman was the guy that closed it out. And I did see the quotes from Rob Thomson, who ultimately said that he had Hoffman warming up anyway, and we know how that game script played out. This was a come-from-behind win for this Phillies team, and he said that he didn't want Hoffman to warm up and then sit down to go to Estevez, so ultimately he will be available moving forward, but he still had Hoffman closing out those high-leverage innings. I don't think that's a bad thing. I trust Hoffman quite a bit, and while there was a little bit of a slip-up midseason, he has ultimately found himself once again, and that's going to be a very high-leverage arm for this team in the bullpen, a right-hander there. Matt Strahm, also a guy that had very clearly exceeded expectations this year. He's been straight-up nasty and a dude that clearly is not moved by the moment, that he's a guy that is willing to pitch in the high moments. He's got an intensity on the mound that very few players can match. We're talking about like screaming to himself and everything about his presence. I've grown to be a Matt Strahm guy very much on this team. Then beyond that, that's where Alvarado comes into play. I think in all likelihood, we're talking about him as more of a lefty specialist when we get into the big minutes, the big innings for this Phillies team in the playoffs. Then Orion Kerkering has also been excellent. That he's a guy who had the stuff and was really rushed in his overall process for coming to the Phillies last year, made his way up through the minors at a rapid rate, and then was thrown in some super high leverage spots in the playoffs last year, far beyond what he was comfortable for, and ultimately the Phillies did get a little bit burned by it. Looking at him this season, feels like he just knows how to pitch better, that he had the stuff before, but now he's figured out how to work things a little bit. And that's something that's really exciting to me. I think there's a very bright future for Orion in the long run, but ultimately very comfortable with him pitching in some key spots for this time already. Tanner Banks, been an excellent addition at the trade deadline there. A guy who just throws strikes, just makes things work, puts it on the money, and a guy that I think I'm pretty comfortable with. I've been really impressed by. Jose Ruiz has, in a lot of situations, been looked at one of the burner pitchers when things are in blowout. But ultimately, he's been better than that he's been pretty consistent, and especially the second half of the season, I've been impressed with Ruiz. Junior Marte is not a guy that I want pitching the playoffs to any extent, but still a guy that can eat when things come out. And I will acknowledge once again that Taijuan Walker has officially stepped out into the bullpen, probably replacing the Garrett Stubbs role, or I say that a little bit joking, as I do think there will probably be some long-term situations that we will get the opportunity. Again, I don't have hate in my heart for Taijuan. I do think that he is trying out there. The reality is the velocity is dipped, and he's just not the major league pitcher that they need him to be at this point in time. But I do hope that Jose Alvarado is a guy that is the major league pitcher this team needs to be. And while obviously it seems like he was dealing with something super serious within his family and sending prayers and good vibes that things are all taken care of, I also don't think it's the worst thing in the world for him to have stepped away from baseball for a little bit. That I think a lot of his issues, even when speaking about the control and finding his spots and those things, a lot of it's more up here than anything physically with Jose. So maybe this was a reset plug. Maybe this was he needed to come down to earth, and whatever he needed to take care of, maybe there was something weighing on his mind that he just simply needed to take care of, and now he can focus on baseball again. Who knows? Again, I don't want to speculate beyond that, but happy that he's back with this Phillies team. Hope that we're seeing the improved version of Jose Alvarado, the guy that we've seen perform on the biggest moments in these past 2 playoff runs, and hope he's ready to gear up for a third this season. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. I want to hear what your expectations are for Jose Alvarado moving forward. Personally, I don't see a world in which he's able to hop any of Estevez, Jeff Hoffman, or Matt Strahm in kind of the high leverage spots, but I still think he's going to be a key part when the moments matter most to those left-handed hitters specifically. So let me know if you're with me on that page, and as always, make sure you are smashing that subscribe button. We're getting close to that 1,000 number, so appreciate each and every one of you guys helping it out. Drop your thoughts below. Drop a like on this video. I'll be talking to you next time right here on Phillies Digest. Peace.